Outlast 2 is a first-person survival horror game wherein the main protagonist is typically weak as shit and so must avoid all confrontation lest he come down with a bad case of being murdered. Think of a walking simulator, except that for every 2 minutes you spend walking, you also spend 5 minutes hiding behind a strategically placed barrel, locker, or box. Crying is optional. Quick warning before we even start this game: intense violence, gore, graphic sexual content, and strong language. Standard opening text blurb one would expect to find in a Dean Koontz novel. Main character is Blake Langermann, husband of investigative journalist Lynn Langermann, on a quest seeking answers behind the mysterious murder of a pregnant woman. I haven't even started and already there are dead babies involved. My job in the game is threefold. Number 1, be husband. Number 2, be assistant. And number 3, be cameraman. Those are my 3 prime directives, and Blake will die before I let him feel. He is probably going to die a lot. By the way, I have to say that Lynn and Blake Langermann are easily the most Dan Brown sounding names I have ever heard. The game opens on Blake getting berated by his wife for sleeping on their helicopter ride to the most dangerous and remote parts of rural America. Being a husband/assistant/cameraman is a 24/7 job, and already Blake is dropping the ball. On top of this, it turns out that Blake was also sleep talking about another girl called Jessica. Lynn seems jealous until Blake reminds her that Jessica was their mutual childhood friend that died in an unspecified horrible manner that they don't really talk about due to their archetypical Catholic repression. Let's file her under things from the protagonist's suppressed subconscious that will undoubtedly come back to haunt us later in the game. Blake's wife reminds him that he is the cameraman, so he probably needs to start doing camera stuff. We experience a little turbulence, which is probably nothing to worry about. Blake's wife nearly falls out of the helicopter and now we are plummeting to our death. The proper intro screen fades in. Notice how the T in the name is an edgy inverted crucifix. Intro then fades into a school hallway which has the classic uninverted crucifix complete with Jesus action figure. I'm detecting a strong religious theme. A locker opens up for no reason. I deduce that the photo is probably of Blake, Lynn and Jessica. Blake, it seems, had game. Tension kicks up as I notice a creepy dude down the hall. I look to Jesus for answers. Jesus has nothing. I continue on, only to have a door slam in Blake's face. We turn to see a creepy girl, probably Jessica. The dream then ends abruptly with a Kubrick-inspired torrent of blood. Blake wakes up back in reality where he has survived a helicopter crash with only the vaguest superficial damage. Despite having just survived a horrible crash landing with minimal injury, Blake remembers that above all things he is still a cameraman.
Fuck.
He then also remembers he is also a husband and should probably search for his wife. We find the smoking wreck of the helicopter. Rather than search the wreckage for his wife, Blake decides this is the best time to start filming stuff. Blake does not find his wife, but he does find the pilot, who has somehow managed to not only fall out of the helicopter, but also get himself entangled in barbed wire and a tree, and also have his internal organs cut out, and that is his penis. That's his penis. Blake moves on and finds a town, but no one is home and the doors are locked. We manage to find one local, but he is in no condition to help, or do anything, really. Blake does find one other more cognizant local, but they seem very camera shy. The town goes on to offer up a gauntlet of the more classic horror tropes. Creepy doll toys. Check. Suspicious trike. Check. Weird psycho guy holding a machete who makes unwavering eye contact before stepping back into the shadows, not blinking once the entire time. Check. After a while, Blake finds a makeshift chapel, complete with perched raven. Once inside, Blake sees a bloody manger, which is on point for religious themes. The game seems to be escalating quite nicely, something of a slow burn horror. Anyway, if we just peek around the corner and let the image come into focus, we find a pit full of dead babies. Yeah, a pit with the charred remains of dozens upon dozens of dead babies. So much for that slow burn. Blake goes outside where he sees a lone rocking horse, some more creepy dolls, a swing airily swinging in the wind. This all seems a little bland after the game just blew its load on a dead baby pit. Out of context, that sounds very wrong. Regardless, I don't think a single unmanned swing in the wind and some dolls are going to cut it after dozens upon dozens of dead babies burnt to a crispy finish in the bowels of a church. I am so preoccupied that I nearly do not see that one of the villagers has gotten quite brave and has decided that Blake needs to be perforated right now. A hasty retreat is in order for Blake. While making a strategic retreat in the nearest hayloft, Blake's fat suburban ass breaks the floor and he falls down. He thinks that no one saw him make a dick of himself, but no, crazy cult lady with a pickaxe saw everything. She then fades into the background fog for maximum spook effect, and possible embarrassment for Blake. Blake sneaks out back and checks that the coast is clear. It seems to be until he sees the random hillbilly psycho rocking back and forth in a chair singing Bible songs.
Come to the shelter.
This prompts a stealth approach. Blake is nearly out of the village when the game decides to throw a slight curveball in the form of a blinding light and a loud blast. I'm about to run and hide, but I'm in luck as it seems that the bright light has turned everyone insane. I mean, they were insane beforehand, what with all the murder and pits full of dead babies, but now they've been pursed right over the edge and have shot all of their proverbial marbles onto the floor. This works for Blake because now he can just waltz straight on out of the village unhindered. That is until Blake comes across another church, which seems to be having a midnight service. From the sounds coming from inside the church, we hear them muttering something about Blake's wife, whom they have captured. Blake could use this chance to storm inside and rescue his wife, but Blake is also a coward. So he uses this opportunity to break into their basement instead, definitely breaking one of his prime directives. Instead of finding some old copies of the Gospel according to Mark, John, Paul, or Ringo, it seems that the church is torturing people in the name of Jesus. The situation is appalling, and Blake really wants to help these people. That is until one of them tries to touch Blake with their filthy leper hands, and he is out, he is done, he is leaving right now. Instead of waiting for Blake to come to the rescue, Lynn decides to rescue herself through a window. As they run away, Blake and Lynn compare how their days have been going. Lynn has been captured, tortured, and forced to endure a random gynecological exam for the last couple of hours. This is unfortunate, but has she had to hide in a series of strategically placed barrels all night? No, I think not. Lynn also thinks that she might be pregnant, which really is the worst time. But then again, is there ever a right time?
Fuck!
Eventually, the dead baby pit cult catch up with us. Blake gets beat up in record time. The cultists restrain Blake and are forcing him to watch as they are about to enforce their pro-choice option on his wife, which is a sentence I never thought I would say. When all seems done for, there is a last-minute save in the form of another rival cult. That's right, this backward rural forest boasts not just one, but two crazy deaf cults, and they are locked in the middle of a turf war. This new cult, which I am going to call the Society of Naked Crazy Twig People, completely steal the dead baby pit cultists. I meet the leader of the Crazy Naked Twig People, who seems to be rocking an androgynous psychosexual theme. Her motif includes murdering rival cultists and casual sexual abuse. After she molests Blake for a bit, she gets bored of his basic ass, knocks him out, steals his wife, and leaves. This is the second time Blake's wife has been kidnapped in the same night. Blake is definitely feeling as a husband, but he is still also a cameraman. He still has a duty to record everything, and maybe get a Netflix documentary out of the whole deal. They are always looking for new stuff. Blake collects himself and moves on by sneaking through a swamp harbour. To recap his adventures, it seems that his wife is pregnant, which is good news, but also could not have come at a worse time, as they are stranded in the most stranded parts of America. There is also the small problem of a cult civil war erupting over his wife's surprise pregnancy. One cult, the Dead Baby Pitters, believe that his wife is carrying the Antichrist and that it needs to be killed, whereas the other cult, the Society of Naked Crazy Twig People, have a more anarchistic outlook on life and want to make sure that the Antichrist gets born. Why does one cult want to bring about the person who will almost certainly end the world? Probably for the lulz. Classic Antichrist anarchists. Just as Blake is thinking Weller naming the child Damien is too on the nose, the game decides to give us another blast of the crazy white strobe light and let me work through some of Blake's Catholic school PTSD in the form of an interactive flashback. This time, Blake is allowed to bring his trusty camera into the flashback. There are some vague cryptic messages from Jessica on the blackboard. Call me cynical, but my intuition tells me that things are not going to pan out for Jessica in the long run. I found another picture of Blake in the 4th grade with Lynn and Jessica. Despite his lack of emotional range, I'm pretty sure Blake was a bit of a player in his youth. I went to an all-boys Catholic school, so I'm low-key seething in jealous rage at this kid. On the plus side though, my school didn't push its style on Catholicism up to 11. This school is so goddamn Catholic, their science textbooks are just a piece of paper that says, because Jesus. A shadowy looking priest pops up in the distance. There's nothing we can do except walk towards him like completely rational adults. Blake decides on a second option, leaving the school, like altogether, like he should have done in the first place. The gate seems locked until magically it decides to open up just for Blake. Against better judgment, we walk through the gate, only to get swallowed whole by the ground and then spattered again into the equally dangerous present. Blake does get a lucky break though. He meets Ethan, who is probably the only local who isn't heavily invested in immediately trying to stab, pummel, or molest him. By default, Ethan is our new best friend. We follow him back to his cabin, where it is subsequently revealed that he is the father of the murdered pregnant woman that we were initially investigating, before those plans got flushed in favour of simply survival. At one point, Ethan asks if we know anything about his daughter. Blake straight up lies through his teeth and tells him that his daughter is fine, despite her actually being very much dead. Ethan is happy about this. Blake seems totally a-okay with lying like a sociopath. Blake suddenly starts to pass out from the accumulated cardio workout that comes with perpetual terror. Ethan lets Blake use his guest room. Ethan is a nice guy. Blake should probably stop lying to him about his daughter being totally dead. When Ethan says he has a guest room, what Ethan actually means is that he has a small dirt tunnel under his house where he keeps a small mattress. Still, he is being nice, so I will definitely leave him a 3-star review on Airbnb. One small power nap later, and Blake wakes up to find Ethan mid-conversation with crazy old pickaxe hag lady. Conversation turns murderous almost immediately. It should be noted that crazy old pickaxe hag lady has surprisingly impressive upper body strength. Blake should probably help, but Blake is also a coward. He decides that the only thing he can do is make sure he videotapes the murder of the only person to help him since he arrived in this hellhole. It's going to look great in his award-winning documentary. Ethan gets totally ganked, which is a shame, because he did seem like the only nice guy in his godforsaken nightmare land. On the plus side, Blake doesn't need to have that awkward conversation about lying to him about his daughter's death. So, there is at least one silver lining to Ethan getting totally shanked right in front of us. Once the coast is clear, we move on. I'm probably going to drop the Airbnb review to 2 stars due to the murder and a general noise complaint. Blake sneaks past an old lady who enjoys walking out and shouting random scripture into the night. She does this every 5 minutes. I checked. That's her job, it seems. Arriving at the next village area, there is a large burning pit, presumably for burning heretics, as well as a hanging tree, also presumably for hanging heretics. The heretics are certainly spoiled for choice when it comes to their execution. I'm in the cornfields when I briefly spot crazy old pickaxe hag lady casually dragging another murder victim behind her. Again, that is an impressive display of upper body strength. Several dead baby pit cultists decide to investigate the fields to see if there are any random investigative journalists / cameramen / husbands hiding in the corn. I wait for at least 10 minutes for these guys to leave, but they just won't leave. It's almost like the game knows where I am, but is pretending not to. But it still totally knows where I am. Boredom starts to supersede fear, so I decide to make a run for it and jump the fence. The only way to move through the next area is through this barn. While I navigate the building, I get to appreciate some of the art pieces, which are mostly made out of repurposed heretics. I'm no art critic, but outside the obvious serial killer motif, the pieces on display generally seem very derivative of the early 2000s rogue taxidermist movement. Someone is unable to take my constructive criticism like an adult, so while Blake is escaping, they hit him with one of the pieces on display. Luckily for Blake, there is a nice soft pile of rotten discarded body parts to break his fall. I continue on my search for Blake's wife when we get another blast of blinding light. This is followed by a flock of birds falling out of the sky stone dead. This should be really spooky, but the cynical part of my brain wants to point out that birds would not really be flying at this time of the night. But the game is trying its best, so I say nothing.